Mike Brust, president of the Wisconsin Bowhunters Association, spoke at our coffee break event on March 7th. He spoke about the WBH, where it's been, where it's going. He also spoke on the spring hearings about the crossbow issue, the increased rate of kill, crossbow versus gun, or both.
Our Wednesday morning coffee clutch. We've got a new guest out here. You're welcome anytime. Please come out and join our fellowship. Today we have a guest speaker, Mr. Mike Brust from the Wisconsin Bowhunters. If you've got your Wisconsin Outdoor Journal, you saw his nice commentary in there. And then if you turn a few pages back, you saw a few rebuttals to him, which is, discussion is always good. So I'd like to again thank you all for coming. Thanks, Mike, for coming out and giving our presentation. And one quick reminder, in a couple of weeks we will have a member from the Wisconsin Conservation Congress coming out here talking about the spring hearings that will be coming up, which is very important. That's our time to put our voice into people that are supposedly have the ear of our state legislators, and sometimes they listen, a lot of times they don't. But anyhow, spring hearings coming up. Please go to your spring hearings and participate. And again, thanks, Mike, and it's all yours.
I have a special place in my heart for the spring hearings too. Actually, Marcel and I go way back. I spent 32 years on the Conservation Congress, actually mostly before I moved up here, so a little bit about that too. Anyway, I'm here to talk about Wisconsin Bowhunters Association. I think most of you have heard about it, but what I want to do is to give a little bit of perspective of Wisconsin Bowhunters. I want to kind of go back to really the history of bow hunting here in Wisconsin, or actually in the country. There were people back in the 1880s, Maurice Thompson and Chief Compton, that shot English longbows, mostly for target shooting. Hunting with a bow and arrow really didn't get off the ground until Ishii came out of the wilderness in California in 1911. He pretty much taught Pope and Young how to shoot and how to hunt with a bow and arrow, and they really got involved with bow and arrow hunting in the even people here in Wisconsin to take a better look at this. In Wisconsin, there were quite a few archers that in the 1920s that started shooting bow tournaments. They were shooting pretty much target shooting. One of those was a guy by the name of Roy Case from the Racine area. Larry Whiffen was from Wisconsin and the West Dallas area. Larry built a lot of bows. Roy Case built bows. But back then, obviously, everybody was pretty much building their own equipment, or using equipment from some of these major manufacturers. One of the early bow shooters back in these tournaments was Aldo Leopold. He and his wife were regulars at these tournaments, and actually really enjoyed shooting bow and arrow, and so it got to the point where Roy Case decided that, besides tournaments, they've shown through Pope and Young that we're hunting all over the world, really without bow licenses, but they had permission, and a lot of states there really weren't bow season or even hunting seasons. They were just hunting where they could. Roy Case thought, well, maybe we could get to actually hunt deer here in Wisconsin with a bow and arrow. Kind of a radical idea at the time. He went to the DNR in 1930 and asked for permission to hunt with a bow and arrow. Well, it wasn't legal at the time. Fortunately, Aldo Leopold was pretty tight with the game commissioner at the time, and between a couple of them, they got permission for Roy Case to be able to hunt during the gun season with a bow and arrow. I guess as I said, the rest is history. In 1930, Roy Case shot a buck with a bow and arrow, which was actually the first First bow shot deer in Wisconsin, obviously, but other than some animals that were shot out west, was really the first official hunting season or hunting opportunity that was sanctioned by the state. In 1934, 4 years later, Wisconsin had the first official bow hunting season. There were 2 counties open just for bow hunting because they felt it was too populated to hunt with rifles at the time. It's kind of strange if you look at it the way it is now. So in 1934, Wisconsin had the first bow hunting season in the country. And we've actually led the country in a lot of ways since. Most of these people, Roy Case in particular, but Aldo Leopold, Larry Whiffen, and quite a few others, in 1940 and 41 decided, well, we should form an association. So in 1941, they actually got a list of everybody that bought a bow license. There were like 1,700 people bought a bow license prior to that. Sent them all letters saying that we'd like to have this meeting in Madison, and they actually had a meeting in March of 1941. And the bottom line is they formed Wisconsin Bowhunters Association. It was kind of slow at first, but they developed the organization, and it's grown ever since. Well, one of the things that was my concern back then, and probably still is somewhat today, is first of all, is this weapon really capable of killing deer, or at least most of the time, or is it just a wounding machine? And they spent a lot of time and effort proving that it was a very effective hunting weapon. They also spent a lot of time encouraging hunters to be, ethical and really promoted that. One of the things that Wisconsin Bowhunters to this day does is really promote the ethics of hunting and fair chasing. So here we are now, 2018. Wisconsin Bowhunters has been around since 1941. It's actually the oldest and largest state bow hunting association in the country by far. But it's changed from what it was. Like I said, it grew slowly, but in through probably the 70s and 80s, it was up to as many as 14,000 members. At the time, we didn't have even 100,000 bow hunters, so it was a pretty good percentage of the bow hunters. Right now, the membership is still about 5,000, which is by far the biggest association in the country, but it's not percentage-wise compared to the way it was back then. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. For me, I know back when I got started back in the 70s, we were just a bunch of crazies that wanted to go out and hunt with bow and arrow and really didn't expect to kill anything, or most people didn't think we were going to be able to kill anything. So people didn't pay that much attention to us. There weren't, we couldn't go in the sporting goods store and buy a bow, at least back in the 60s. A lot of times you couldn't even buy most of your equipment. You had to either make it or order it through a catalog or something like that. So most of the equipment that we used, whether it was broadheads we sharpened ourselves, sometimes even the arrows and everything else, we built ourselves. And that changed through the 70s and 80s and beyond. But the other thing is, if we wanted to know, how to bow hunt, or what's the latest technique, or what's going on, we needed to be able to deal with these other bow hunters, which were pretty much scattered throughout the state. So Wisconsin Bowhunters at that time was really a kind of a clearinghouse for information, a way to kind of get together and shoot. The other thing, of course, is shooting recurs. We have basically had to practice pretty much all year round, so we had a lot of shoots, and really a lot of that was coordinated through Wisconsin Bowhunters Association. The other thing that changed is we didn't have bow hunting magazines, we didn't have all these bow hunting videos and YouTube and everything else. If we really wanted to know about bow hunting, Wisconsin Bowhunters was the place to be. The other thing is that because it promoted the ethics of bow hunting quite a bit, it was kind of considered, the right place to be. So what have we done lately, or what have you done for us lately? One of the things that I think every organization understands is that people think it's important what you did in the past, but really, what have you done for me lately is why they want to pay their dues every year. Wisconsin Bowhunters, not only did they have the first bow hunting season, we had Wisconsin Bowhunters was the main advocate for longer bow hunting seasons, for bow hunting only seasons. Wisconsin had the first bear archery season. We were the first state to have either sex seasons for bow and arrow. We were the first state that approved camo during the archery season instead of having to wear red. We had, in 1965, we established a separate archery license so we could keep track of who was bow hunting and who wasn't, which really helped be able to identify and verify that we were a force in wildlife management in Wisconsin. But what I think most people don't realize is that other states followed our lead. Most of the bow hunting seasons and regulations you see across the country really developed from copying Wisconsin. We were the first for most of these things, and most of other states really didn't know, what to do about bow hunters, but they looked at Wisconsin, and we had a seasoned systems that work, and so a lot of what you see across the country now is because of Wisconsin and what Wisconsin DNR and Wisconsin Bowhunters helped develop. So I think that it's safe to say that, these longer seasons, not just in Wisconsin, but across the country, the work of some of those early pioneers with Wisconsin Bowhunters Association. The organization developed through the 50s and 60s. And like I say, it was pretty important, but as more information became available, as bow hunting went from being kind of a cottage industry to a major industry in the marketplace, things changed. We weren't needed by bow hunters like we used to be, but in a lot of ways, we're needed as much or more now, because back then hunting was just assumed that, most people who live in the country just hunted, and, it was a good idea, good thing. We got a lot of people now that think that hunting, any kind of hunting, is a bad thing. And they have quite a bit of voice in Madison and across the country. And one of the things that Wisconsin Bowhunters does pretty much every day is fight to make sure that bow hunting and hunting in general is protected from those that want to end hunting. And that's really what's going on. We've led the way on a lot of things. One of the things that I'm going to bring up, because one of the trends that is developed over the last 15 to 20 years is the addition of crossbows to bow hunting seasons in a lot of states, particularly the southern states. Most of the states fought it. Most of the bow hunters in those states fought it. They said, we don't want crossbows, and they lost. So now they have crossbows as part of their archery season. They're considered in those states as archery equipment. We worked with a lot of other states. I was involved with the North American Bow Hunting Coalition, where we had a group of the state associations from all over the country and tried to compare notes. But one of the things that we saw was that crossbows are coming. If we fight them, we're going to lose. I mean, if we want to just keep them out, we're going to lose that battle. So we said, well, if they're coming, let's find a place for them that's not the archery season. Well, because our archery season takes up the whole fall, our alternative was to say, well, let's at least keep them separated. So they're identified separately and regulated separately. And so back in 2013, we actually supported the what's called the crossbow bill now here in Wisconsin. And it said crossbows are a separate weapon. They are regulated and licensed separately, but because of the fact that people at the time argued, well, these things are heavy, they make a lot of noise, they're not accurate, have very short range, that they're less effective than archery equipment. We argued that no, everything indicates that first of all they are now, that they're certainly not going to be in the future. So we worked with the legislators, and they put in a provision in the law that says after 2 years, the department can look at the data, because now we were the first state that had separate data. In other states, it was just, nobody knew who shot what with what, and so nobody had data to prove the crossbows were either more or less effective. We had the data, so the department said, after 2 years, we can look at the data, and if it is true that crossbows are more effective than archery equipment, we can change them. Actually, the legislators wrote in the statute that the Department of Natural Resources, after 2 years to review it, could make that change. The data came out. The first year was pretty clear. The crossbows were more effective than archery equipment. Even back then, which was only 4 years ago, crossbows weren't nearly as sophisticated as they are now, but their success was about 40% greater. This mostly looked at bucks, because bucks was what everybody was mostly concerned about, but their success was about 40% better than archery hunters or gun hunters in their 9-day season or extended seasons. So we said, well, okay, we'll wait 2 years. The next year, again, it was the same, it was a little higher. One of the things, I think the best way to show this is a graph that shows the success percentage on bucks for bow hunters and gun hunters and crossbows. This is 2014, 15, 16, and 2017 hunting seasons. Clearly, they're on a different plane. And we said, okay, we waited 2 years. We went to the department. They said, well, 2 years is really not enough. And frankly, and I've worked with the department for close to 40 years now, they've become a lot more political than they used to be. There's a lot of, don't want to offend anybody, we don't want to change anything, and so we went for 2 years, or 2 years since the 2-year trial period, and the department is still kind of hemming and hawing, and so we finally worked with, actually I have a good friend who's on the board of natural resources. He owns an archery shop down in southeastern Wisconsin, and he and I have been working on this and looking at this ever since 2014. We got to the point where we couldn't get the Conservation Congress to put it on the spring questionnaire to say, okay, let's look at something that just adjusts the crossbow season so that this graph comes out pretty much even. So all three of them are on pretty much the same line. So the Congress, after 2 years of resolutions, wouldn't advance it to the spring hearings. So this last spring, yes?
Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it?
Well, it has to go through what used to be called the Big Game Committee. Now it's called the Deer and Elk Committee of the Congress. Marcel probably knows most of the people on that committee. Most of them are old-time gun hunters. And most of the old-time gun hunters still resent the fact that bow hunters get to hunt before they do, and they said, well, screw you. We're just not going to advance it. And there were, I went to every one of their committee meetings, and they talked about it a few times, but they never would put it on. And so, and like I say, Marcel, I know most of the guys, and most of them just, first of all, they didn't believe it. Second of all, they said, well, we just don't think it's a problem. 2 years wasn't enough, and 3 years wasn't enough. And so finally, this last spring, we said, in fact, the Board of Natural Resources said, we're going to put it on because it needs to be looked at least the public needs to have a say about whether it should be changed or not. So I appeared before the Board of Natural Resources and kind of made a plea to advance this. And what was interesting to me was, at the time, 2 board members, besides the individual who was working with me on this, asked questions about why can't we do this right now? Why can't we do it for this fall? I mean, they were ready to go before we even had public input. So there's clearly support on the board. These are 3 of the most influential board members as it relates to deer hunting. So there's no question that if the public supports it, the board will either force the department to do it or do it themselves to adjust the crossbow season. But what it comes down to right now is, because the board put the question on, and I don't know if any of you have not heard about it, but this year, this spring's questionnaire has a question that says, all it says for those that are not disabled or elderly, to better reflect harvest success rates of bucks similar to the gun season and the archery season. That's the question. If we support that, and if we can get statewide support for that, then the department will act. I mean, they've said that they need public input, and if they wouldn't act, the Board of Natural Resources has been pretty clear about the fact that they will act. So it really now at this point comes down to, if we can get this question passed.
Can you read the question again, please?
Pardon me?
Can you read the question
I
again?
will read it again. Do you support the DNR adjusting the length of the crossbow season for those that are not disabled or elderly?
Okay, that was my question. Not, okay.
Right. To better reflect harvest success rates on bucks, similar to the gun season and archery season. So the argument isn't get rid of crossbows. The argument isn't bow hunters versus crossbow hunters, because frankly the gun hunters are just as much as a disadvantage as the bow hunters are. The argument is, let's make it so that everybody kind of has an equal chance. And to illustrate how much impact crossbows have had, in 2013 we had licensed bow hunters of just over 250,000, just over 250,000 licensed bow hunters. This last fall, the licensed bow hunters were 152,000 licensed bow hunters. In 4 years, we have lost almost exactly 100,000 licensed bow hunters. Bow hunters they're shifting to crossbows, some are just quitting, some don't want to be out there, some are frustrated by what's going on, and even the gunners. Some gunners are frustrated. I know that we've got a friend who has a deer camp up near Mercer, and they had 6 guys that went up there every year, and 3 of them switched to crossbows last year and don't go up with them anymore. And their deer camp basically closed during the rifle season now. They just gave it up because there's only 3 guys left.
When you're talking about adjusting the season, are they talking about saying taking 2 or 3 weeks of the rut out of the season and letting the bow or crossbow hunters hunt the rest of the time? Or-
That's actually one of the things that we found out when we were kind of experimenting with this question was, what is the public going to support? First of all, if we assign dates to this question, we found that most people had a problem with this date or that date. At this point, all we're saying is let's make it fair. In looking at the numbers as to what it would take to get kind of an equal balance, there's pretty much 2 options. Either the crossbows would hunt just the rut and nothing else, or they would hunt everything else and not November, or at least the peak of the rut. Yes?
Well, at the last meeting, spring, results was there. One guy proposed that they hunt September to October. That's it. That's what crossbow hunters get. Is that still somewhere?
Well,
Because that should be back up again this year, that same question, should it not?
well, this year the question will be this question.
Okay.
If this passes, probably the best example of what works is to look at the state of Kentucky. In Kentucky, their bow hunt starts the 1st of September and runs through the 2nd week of January. Pretty similar to ours. In Kentucky, their crossbow season starts 2 weeks after their bow season starts. It ends on October 15th, and then starts again the 1st of, or when their gun season starts, and runs to the 1st of January. So in that case, bow hunters have the first 2 weeks from November or October 15th through their gun season, which is basically the peak of the rut, and then 2 weeks on the end. Like I say, if this passes, in looking at the numbers, what it would probably come out to is the crossbow hunters would either hunt, up till either sometime in mid to late November, or pardon me, October, and then probably again in late season.
That's fine.
Or if they hadn't had the rut, they would probably end up with basically 2 weeks beginning of November. I know that the argument back when we passed the crossbow bill is they wanted to hunt when the weather was nice, because there really was a lot of disabled and elderly people at the time. And so there's a pretty good argument for everything but the rut. But that won't be discussed and settled until this passes moving forward.
Of the crossbow registrations that you have, and you said like 250,000 or something this last year, how many of those are people that are, classified as disabled or over 65?
It's a pretty good question. They think that there were roughly 20,000, and this last year there were 83,000 crossbow licenses sold. So, but then there were another over 30,000 crossbow add-ons, so there were probably over 100,000 people hunting with crossbows this last fall.
Oh, okay.
But probably about 20% are disabled and elderly, yes.
Does this have to run a 3-year gamut?
No.
Okay.
One of the good things about doing it this way, as opposed to a Congress question, is if a Congress question passes, it has to be re-asked by the DNR the following year.
Then
Because
it goes another year yet.
it's
3 years
it
it runs.
Yep.
Because we just passed one for bearskin fruit for less than 10 panfish
Yep.
a season. Now, I started that 4 years ago. It finally got, this year it'll be
Well,
adopted.
because this question is coming from the Board of Natural Resources, it's like the DNR question. It can't be implemented this fall if it passes this spring, because the regulations are printed and everything else. It's really virtually impossible to implement it this fall. Plus, we have to kind of work out what the seasons are going to be. But it's very likely that by the following fall, 2019, it would be in place. So that's kind of where we're at. Yes?
The question that I would have is, there's an awful lot of hunters out there that are concerned about the crossbows are taking out a lot of our mature deer, our breeding bucks and so forth. Has any thought been given to, let's say, starting the season November 20th
20th with the crossbow, and it goes up to the end of January 2nd or 4th or whatever it is. Now, allowing them to hunt with the crossbows during the rifle hunt, because they're shooting out of stands and everything else. Anyway,
It would be legal, it's actually legal now, so that wouldn't change.
but you're gonna hold them back from the front end where you have the breeding going on in late October. And you're not gonna take away from the archer that says, you know, I can't wait until September 15th when I can start hunting, and going up through November 20th or whatever, and then allowing the rifle and the crossbow from there on in.
The answer to that is we don't know. We don't know when it will be. One of the questions that I've asked, in fact, I asked it this weekend to Kevin Wallenbank at the major convention, isn't the department concerned about the fact that we have an extra, a much bigger harvest prior to the rut than or during the rut than we've had in the past, and biologically, is that, you know, affect the deer herd? Because to me, why do we have a gun season later if we could have it during the rut? His answer was, they don't think it's a problem. They don't know.
By me, I know it does affect it from the standpoint that I see does during deer season doing it before. So either not getting impregnated the year before with the dropping of fawns, or we haven't got enough bucks to take care of that problem, or who knows.
Well, the elephant in the room on this whole thing is the fact that in early 2001, 2002, Professor Heberlein I think he was from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, did a study that said by 2030, we won't have enough hunters left to control the deer population. And ever since that study came along, so that the numbers aren't dropping off like he thought they would, the DNR, and this has never been said out loud, but the DNR is clearly concerned about an overpopulation of deer in the future. Whether it's, you know, keeping the impregnation rate down, whether it involves wolves, whether it involves CWT, they have been really concerned about making sure that the deer population doesn't get out of control. And so, like you said, it's never said out loud, but you can see a lot of things that they're doing are trying to make sure that as we go forward, we've got ways to kill deer. One other answers to the crossbow situation is, you know, we got more people killing more deer. This is a great thing. And the other is, we don't care how you kill them as long as you kill them. I mean, unfortunately, that's an attitude of a lot of people in the department right now.
So you drive the Wisconsin roads and you're going to find an awful lot of dead deer alongside of the roads. That's not from guns and bows and arrows. That's from automobiles and trucks.
I hunt up in Medford, and I drove back and forth to Medford during rifle season. And normally, I mean, I didn't even hit deer driving back and forth to Medford in the past. This last year, I never saw one deer out in the fields or anywhere, and I didn't change my habit of driving. I never saw one deer in the whole gun season.
Again, that's just speculation on my part, but I've worked with the department long enough to know that a lot of people are thinking that way.
Okay, then my last comment is, on your chart there, where you showed the last 4 years, where the kill has gone up, resulting from the crossbows. Is that good or bad?
Well, depends who you ask. I mean, I sat 53 days this last fall in bow season before I saw a buck. So for me, you know, a few more deer wouldn't be a bad thing.
I think that's in general across the way. My next question is, in implementing something like this, are we going to start alienating people from the bow hunting or from the hunting in general by taking them out of the hunting time that they want to use?
Well, I guess the thing about it is, and again, personally, and according to and WBH position is very clear, we have nothing against crossbows. It's another opportunity, it's another weapon choice. It's some people, it's a perfect answer for it. All we're saying is, let's make it so
Try
that
to level the
everybody has
playing
an
field
equal
for
chance.
everybody else.
One of the things that, you know, people have said to me is you're just creating fighting amongst hunters, which is, nobody wants that. We don't want hunters fighting with hunters.
I think you're gonna end up doing that.
Well, but as long as we have a situation where one group has a very significant advantage over everybody else, there's always going to be conflict. If we can get it so that everybody has relatively the same chance, that should diminish the conflict.
Personally, I don't have a dog in this fight because
Right.
I'm over 70, I'm handicapped. I do hunt with a crossbow only because I can't hunt with my new compound bow. But in the same vein, I don't, and you know, I hear people say, oh, it's just like hunting with a rifle and everything else. Well, you and I discussed and I shoot a lot of rifles. It's nothing close to that. But that's neither here nor there. The big thing is, I just don't want to see a big fight within the hunting community over something like this because I think we're all going to lose ultimately.
Well, the fight's been going on for several years. This hopefully will balance it out so that there's no reason to fight.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. One of the things that I try to avoid getting into is arguments over, you know, how effective is a crossbow, because some of the new ones are amazing. I watched a YouTube video of, I believe it was the Raven crossbow at the SHOT Show, and they had them lined up on the table, and they had another rack 100 yards away with apples on it. And these sports writers who've never shot them before were able to sit down at this bench and shoot apples at 100 yards with these crossbows. You know, you can tell all kinds of stories like that. It doesn't matter. When it comes down to, in Wisconsin, how much more successful are they than our
Sure, I understand where you're coming from there.
and so I try not to even get into, you know, can you do this or that with them? It's really what it comes down to is what are they doing in the woods? Yes, George.
Wyoming is just considering right now, they've had a crossbow season and archery season for a long time, even when I hunted out there years ago. And they're considering moving all of the crossbows into the gun season now, whether you're disabled or not, and also to eliminate the cameras. So that's what's going on out there.
Wyoming was actually the only state in the country that never had a prohibition of crossbows. You
Right.
could always use a crossbow to hunt in Wyoming. And it was never a problem because you hunt in Wyoming, you're walking long distances, you're climbing mountains. To carry a big old crossbow was kind of nobody wants to do it. So it was never a big issue. Some of the new crossbows now are less, or the weight of a rifle or less, and you know, some of them are only 6.5 inches wide, and able to shoot out to 100 yards pretty accurately. So it's become an issue out there. One of the things that we've also heard from is Kentucky has this split season, and their crossbow people are pushing to, you know, just throw it in with the archery season. And we're trying to help them because we have the data to show that, you know, that wouldn't be a good idea. So, you know, there's a lot of this going on. One of the things that we've found, and you know, you'll hear it at the spring hearings, is there are people that hunt with crossbows, some of them very legitimately and good for them, that if that's the only way they can get out there, good for them, that don't want to see any changes because right now it's a pretty sweet deal. And they're going to fight this. And so we know that we're going to have opposition at the spring hearings, but we believe that if we can get, you know, enough people out to support it, we can get it passed and we can get a balanced season for everybody.
Right?
Yes?
There's another question on there too about pneumatic guns and bowls, and I think that's important because the way it's worded, it says during the hunting season. It doesn't say bow hunting season or gun hunting season. And if me, it's a slippery slope to put that one in there too.
Yeah, there's an air
It's
bowl.
not.
There's an air bowl question on the spring hearings, and frankly, I had kind of mixed feelings about it originally, because it did say during the gun season. And yet there were a lot of people who said, no, we don't want air bowls in Wisconsin. Well, again, like crossbows, you can fight them until you lose, or you can channel them to where they're not a problem. But the question that came out in the spring hearings that we're going to hit the vote on doesn't say just the gun season anymore. It just says for deer hunting, and frankly, based on that, I would say we should strongly oppose it. The other thing, though, is if we can get a separate season, a shorter season for crossbows, air bows are considered probably more effective than crossbows, so at least they wouldn't even consider them the bow season, because they would at best fall into the crossbow season. But right now the crossbow season is the whole bow season. So the first step is to get this one fixed and then address that as it comes up. But I think there's a pretty strong argument, because this is the DNR's position right now is they are a rifle. They are a equivalent, basically they're an air rifle that shoots an arrow. And their position is it is a rifle, and it's only allowed in the rifle season. So right now that's the case, but if we can shorten the crossbow season, if they ever do make a push, we've got a pretty good place to say, well, no, they certainly are more effective than crossbows, so they wouldn't belong in the archery season. So, but yeah, I think at this point, until they clarify it, that's something that we shouldn't even support at all.
Mike, in conjunction with what you said before about the season from Kentucky, you just might add a little light to what Gary Paul were asking before too. So, from a couple of different sources, is that you're working kind of towards that type of breakdown, like from the beginning of bow season till like around 15th of October, and then starting at gun season. And the reason that they're hoping that might carry over is because in Wisconsin here, you know that the rut is always changing, early or late. So if the rut comes early, the ones that are there until the 15th of October have the benefit of the rut, or part of it. If the rut comes late, the ones that are starting during gun season with the crossbows have the benefit of the rut. So it's a win-win situation on that part, and you're hoping that that'll help sway part of this split season.
Yeah, what it will come down to, in some respects, it's probably a good thing that we've gone 4 years instead of 2, because as you can see, the first 2 years they were certainly more effective, but this last fall, your odds of getting a buck with a crossbow were really double that of a gun or a bow. And all indications are this line is going to keep going up. So if we'd have bought this back there, we might have only taken out a week or 2, but I think there's a pretty good argument now that it's going to take more than that. But anyway, back to Wisconsin Bowhunters. This is the latest what have you done for me lately, but I think that it's a very important organization. It's an organization that our mission is to promote, preserve, and protect bow hunting, not only in Wisconsin, but bow hunting in general. And one of the things that we've always done is really worked with and through the clubs. That's always been kind of a mainstay of Wisconsin Bowhunters, is to try to support the clubs and the shoots and things like that. We have, as most of you've seen in the magazine, we have a list of all the shoots and a lot of the ads for the clubs. We have really the ads we run for shoots are pretty much just at cost. But it's one thing where we really try to support the clubs. I think it's important that we do that. Again, with 100,000 less bow hunters, the clubs are struggling too. A lot of them are. Some of them said, well, we'll allow crossbows too, and that's fine. I mean, that's up to the club. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they've had to reinforce their bunkers and everything else. I know that I was at a club where they they allowed a guy to shoot his crossbow in their indoor range, and it went through the bales and through the wall behind the bales and out the back of the building. So it's, there's nothing wrong with crossbow. And there, for people that either can't get out to practice or can only get out a couple times and feel that that's what they need, or have a disability issue where they can't hunt with them. As far as getting the youth involved, I have real mixed feelings about that. I know that back in 1995, North Delaney loaned me a crossbow that he had just to do some testing with it. In fact, it would have been in 2005. I brought it here. First I tried it at home, and it had a kind of a spring cord type block and tackle system where you wound it up, and you had this little metal horseshoe that hooked on the string. And I shot it a couple times, and I was inside, and I wasn't paying attention, and that string got off one of the pulleys, and they had kind of a sharp edge, and all of a sudden I was about 3/4 of the way full, and the whole thing broke, and the string let loose, and that little horseshoe went across the room and stuck in the drywall. I mean, and this was a 150-pound crossbow. To me, it reminds me a little bit, once they're cranked up. So I'm not sure. I mean, they're famous for taking people's thumbs off if they hold them wrong. The idea of using them for kids, I mean, it's a great marketing tool for them, but I'd be pretty leery about it myself. But that's just me. Yeah.
It's starting to happen because when we were at Cedar Creek, there, Rib Mountain, that group during your expo, they're involved in there. And you'd ask the kids if they had a board on. Oh yeah, what kind of crossbow? So there's that toys already. And I think a way for people to get a little more into the history of the Wisconsin Bowhunter, maybe go down and Clintonville there and see the museum. It's really, really interesting.
Yep.
They'll teach them a lot about what you were talking about, how these fellows were.
Sure.
That had a bow season in the first place. And it's really
Well, and that's one of the things. I don't know how many have been to our office in Clintonville. It's open every day, and adjacent to it is the museum, and it is the Wisconsin Bow Hunting Museum, and it has a lot of the bows and equipment from back in Roy Case's time and things like that. It is really interesting. There's a lot of different, as the compound bow developed, different stages of what that looked like, and so it is very interesting. Spaces get kind of cramped in there, but there's a lot of cool stuff in there. Lately, probably the biggest issue we've been working on is the crossbow issue, but I get down to Madison way more than I'd like to meet with legislators and the DNR. Frankly, it's kind of not my favorite place in the world. A bunch of people down there that think a whole lot different than I do, but
Washington, D.C.
but we spend a lot of time, working with legislators and with the DNR. We've got a legislative liaison down there who's in the Capitol pretty often too, but it's something where we're always watching, especially with anti-hunters. They're always trying to pull something. One of the things that you probably saw is even though the hunting was expanded to state parks 5 years ago and has proved to be a real good opportunity for people that don't have their own land, and it's very safe and not a problem. Fred Risser has introduced a bill which didn't go anywhere to end all of that. And the Humane Society of the United States actually has an office in Madison where they're always trying to, again, influence legislators. Fortunately, most of our legislators in the state understand what hunting is all about. And the Natural Resources Committee of the legislature is made up primarily of pretty avid hunters. And as long as that's the case, most of this kind of stuff has to go through them, and they weed a lot of it out. A couple of them actually get a little overzealous. I'm sure that you've heard the name Joel Kleefish. Joel's chairman of that committee. He's done quite a few things just pretty much on his own without testing public opinion. Some of them good, some of them have changed some of our traditions here in Wisconsin. His heart's in the right place, but he gets a little overzealous at times. One of the other arguments, and I keep getting back to this crossbow thing, is we've seen in the last 4 years a huge shift in bow hunting or deer hunting in general. Gun hunters are moving into the crossbow season. Bow hunters are shifting to crossbows. A lot of the traditions that we're trying to protect are changing dramatically, and in the long run, that's probably not good for the future of deer hunting in Wisconsin. So if there's another argument to try to get this balance, let's just kind of keep our traditions, so that we don't lose people. But yes.
Lance, I was thinking here too, Vermont Bowman as a club is going to suffer from this too, as we talk about going from 250,000 bow hunters to 150,000. Years ago we'd have a shoot and we might have 150 people on the weekend. Nowadays we get 70 to 80, it could be considered a good weekend. Another trend we see is that
many other states have it and have no problem with it. The other thing is, what people don't understand is whatever age that youth is under 12, they have to be within arm's reach. They have to be mentored. They have to be right next to a person that is a legal mentor. The statistic shows that in every state where this situation occurs, those hunters are 6 times more safe than an average hunter. So because of that, we have all supported the mentor hunting program. The fact that people are abusing it and shooting kids and shooting deer and taking it with their 2-year-old's tag or something is unfortunate. But the other thing that we've seen is that, or they've seen, and Sportsman's Alliance has really spearheaded this, is in those states they do get much better recruitment if you get the kids involved. I know I've taught hunter safety for a long time, and one of the things we used to joke about was these young boys, if you get them before they discover girls, they're much more interested in hunting, but then you lose them for maybe 10 years, and then so a lot of them come back, but it's really at some point in time you've got to give them a taste of what hunting's about. I know, for my example, when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, I used to go duck hunting with my dad, and we both, and this was really before there were age restrictions, giving away my age a little bit here, but we both shot ducks, and I had a 20 gauge and didn't shoot him as far as he did, but the idea that only one of us could shoot back then would have made no sense to me. So there are times when my middle son, I didn't let him bow hunt until he was 18. He just wasn't good enough. He wanted to, but he wasn't good enough. My daughter was really good with a rifle by the time she was 8 and 9. She could have easily deer hunted when she was 8 or 9. So the law basically said, let the parent make the judgment. And based on that, we have supported the mentor hunting bill all along. Yes?
Mike, just for kicks, if anyone does want to join the WBH, we've got the forms on the back bar here. Besides getting that, if you do like to go and shoot at clubs, you'll know every weekend from April to August, you'll know where there's an open shoot. Whether you're a compound or trad shooter, you'll know where to go. So Rib, we don't have to join. My other club I belong to, it's mandatory for you to belong to Ojibwa Bowhunters that you belong to the WBH. So each club is unique. But again, if you don't know where clubs have shoots, the WBH will let you know where.
Yeah, the where to shoot, I mean, we have, here's a nice ad.
Thank you.
We have ads that we run every, like I say, basically at cost, but we also have the where to shoot section. So by weekend and by day, it shows where shoots are across the state. So if you're interested in going to different shoots, they're all listed. I mean, I don't think there are many people that do shoots that don't list them because, again, we do it pretty much at cost. The other thing to keep in mind is this June, I think it's 8 through 12, the Pope and Young Club is coming back to the McKenzie Center in Pointe for their second rendezvous. There'll be people from pretty much across the country there. But that's quite an amazing shoot, and they will be. I think they had 4 or 5 whole 3D courses the last time they were, and they expect to expand on that. We have a booth down there, and they've actually supported us. Yes.
Right. Has the Wisconsin Bowhunters thought about tying into the youth program with Genesis Bowls? Because that's becoming a very popular compound target thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the state they get thousands of kids shooting in NAFTA.
Yep. We, 2 things. First of all, every year except this year for a couple different reasons, mostly unfortunate reasons, we hold a National Archery in the Schools program tournament as part of our convention. But better than that, we allocate, I think it's $6,000 or $7,000 a year to support NASC programs for the schools. If a school says we can't afford it, we will match. If they can raise $1,000, we'll match their $1,000. It's a great program, and we support it until the money runs out, which usually gets us pretty much through the year. But we allocate, I think it's $6,000 a year just to help support those programs. And again, it's a great program. And they shoot without sights, believe it or not. Any other questions?
You mentioned that the Wisconsin Bowhunters started in 1941, but you didn't give the real reason why they started in 1941. That was the year I was born.
It's amazing to me that modern bow hunting in North America is just about 100 years old. Pope and Young were really the first real bow hunters in the United States, and Wisconsin Bowhunters has been around for more than 3/4 of that time. Pope and Young didn't even form until 1961, 20 years after we did. So it's been around a long time. We hope it's going to be around for a long time in the future. But again, our interest is supporting what we do, promoting it, preserving it, protecting it. And the one other thing about it is it's an organization. It's not a few people, a few directors. Like now, we can't do this without the help of our members. We need support. So it's something where it's really all of us. We have the office and stuff like that, but it really is about all bowhunters. Yes, you have to.
I just wonder if any of the North American, the Native American tribes have had any interest in growing into this sport or growing into this organization.
We haven't heard from any.
Because it'd be interesting as to when they abandoned archery for rifles. History-wise, you can turn to your timeline. It's kind of, just to me, it just was, say we're talking about first legal kill, but yet we knew that entire tribes and population supported themselves.
I was thinking that same thing.
Right after Custer's last stand is when he went to rifles instead of they worked up their rifles and away they went.
They never went back.
Oh,
Doug, we're
weren't you guys down in Ojibwe teaching Native Americans how to do bows?
Cute, Harry.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I know years ago, DNR was pushing up midweek opening rifle season to reduce hunting. So now what they do, they've got all these other new seasons, the youth season, all this stuff. And I think that's taken away from the traditional rifle.
There are still.
You don't have all these people coming, because they look forward to that one day. And now they don't have that, they get out with all this other hunting. And I think that's right a lot of hunting.
Well, one of the things that we believe, if the crossbows are taken out in the peak of the rut, we believe will happen, is the DNR every year gets hundreds of complaints about the fact that there are no deer here during the day, but we see the tracks there the next morning. But opening day, we sat all day, didn't see a deer. There is so much pressure, and bow hunters are part of it, but bow hunters, by and large, are more concerned about their wind and the disruption of the woods. From my experience in actually a couple of crossbow hunters I've watched, they're like gun hunters. They're tromping around and banging on stands and stuff like that. And I think that if that is removed, also because we have less bow hunters now, there's going to be a lot less pressure on those deer in that last few days before the gun season, and there's going to be less chance that they're going to be nocturnal come opening morning. Yes.
Just one last thing. I think I missed Harry's point that on April 21st, 22nd, Ojibwa does have something called Bow Jam and bow, and we've had more young kids. Some girls sometimes, they'll sit there a day and a half, and they'll start with a piece of wood, a stave, and they'll have a working bow within a day. So it is a plus side what the WTA and Ojibwa does right now once a year, so someone can make their own bow and go back to.
Get the eccentrics and the cable.
You just lost it in your head.
This has nothing to do with anything, but other than the comment on what's been lost in the days of smoking with it at least. It's tradition, kids go to Walmart and buy whatever, something, aren't you? And wizardship, people clean them.
It's one of mine.
They don't know wizardship, or the history that is, there's no answer to that, but it's really shit.
Yes, it is.
And our culture is results oriented more and more. And you spoke to the numbers of 100,000. We lost 100,000 bow hunters. It's only because anybody who's smart enough to look at those numbers and they've got a limited amount of time. It's like, why should I practice? Why should I hunt this crossbow? I know it's a 30-yard drop. You can't get away from that. And they said with the Raven, I've had a crossbow since 2012. I had 5 people shoot that crossbow who never shot a weapon in my life. At 30 yards, they hit the bullseye offhand with a 3-pound trigger. The first time I took it out and shot a buck with it during the rut, it's like, this isn't fair. This is not fair.
Well, I've had people call me, this was actually before 2014. He had a crossbow on a disabled permit. He called me up and he said, I hunted with a bow for many years. I switched to this crossbow because I think he was over 65 or whatever, and he said, it's really not fair. He said, I shot my deer last year at, I think he said 62 yards. He said he shot my deer. I shot an 8-point buck this year at 107 yards. And this was back, 5 years ago. But all of that really doesn't matter. It really comes down to the numbers. Are they effective, more effective, or less effective? And let's just get it balanced.
And they are.
Yep, there's no question. One of the things for me is I'm left-handed, and during rifle season, all the deer over here, I shoot left-handed. If there's a deer over here, I shoot it right-handed. I can't do that with a bow. Well, you all know it. Get it turned around and everything else. It's a different thing altogether. So. Any other questions?
I was ice fishing with a guy one time, and he said he hunted deer 12 years with a bull and shot 3 deer. And he got 62, so he did a crossbow, and he said he shot 20 deer in 4 years with a rifle.
Yeah, I'd like to thank
April 9th at 7 p.m. in all 72 counties is the spring hearings for people to vote on their hunting and fishing rules. The last pictures show the increased rate of kill of the crossbow versus the gun of the bow.